Chapter 10, Gangnam Station 6. Have you decided? Whilst Hansu went to the convenience store to get something, he gave some time to the three of them to decide. And then Mihi nodded her head. Well, they probably know. You can realize just from T-Soon's situation. Stats were important, but skills were also very important. If that skill went into somebody up there, then the gap they created through diligent hunting could be crushed in an instant. And to prevent that, a trustworthy person of the three would purchase the skill. In conclusion, gathering up the runes has been beneficial. The runes that one person has is rather lacking to buy it, but it could easily be solved by lending. Hansu asked while chuckling. Whom was it decided to be given to? At those words Mihi answered. It's me. As I expected. He guessed somewhat to this extent. Since Hansu saw Mihi pick up a mana rune earlier. No one was there to bicker who killed it, so from her taking it quietly, it seemed like she wanted to hide it. Well, the more hidden cards you have, the better. Whatever happens, that skill required mana. And because of that, for Sangjin and Taesoon, who had no mana, it'd be rather burdensome for them to invest in the skill rune, since they would never know when a mana rune would come out. But Mihi had already gained mana runes and already confirmed that mana runes can drop from hunting. And from her situation where she had already confirmed the performance of the skill, it would have been very enticing. And the remaining two probably felt safer giving it to Mihi than giving it to others. Mihi borrowed the runes from Sangjin and Taesoon while shaking their hands and then approached Hansu. Good. Here they are. There are 3 each for agility and perception and 7 each for stamina and strength. Since I said I'll give a 5% discount, I will only take 6 strength. You're quite thorough. Mihi looked at him with a slightly resentful expression. With that many stats, you could really become strong. She had fought a few times, but you can tell instantly. Not having runes is getting closer to death. Though she had gotten a skill, she seemed to have felt a little regret. And Hansu looked at Mihi's expression and chuckled. Don't think that it's too much. If you get into the habit of getting free things around here, you will die quickly. There is no trade in this world that does not cost in some way. Whilst chasing costless things, the cost will have stacked somewhere else and will explode. It wasn't somewhere like a mart's food sample corners where no one would say anything if you eat and run away. Let's see. Since the barb snake was dead and the trade was complete, there was something he had to finish here. Hansu started to look around the train station. The existence of a barb snake means there is deuterium ore nearby. And indeed there was a few orange ores that sprouted out like crystals near the train station. Hansu grabbed them with his hands and rooted them out. To duduk. It was very elastic. Despite it being a metal, it felt like pulling rubber. Hansu started to mold the deuterium with his hands. And the 3 stared at Hansu. Spike? Needle? Taesoon stared at the deuterium metal that was being molded like clay enthusiastically. Hansu left the needle that was molded to about 20 centimeters in the corner, went up to the barb snake, ripped off the scales and started to rip its stomach open. Shuuk! It's here! Hansu made a delighted expression as he saw that the lysate solution sources hadn't dried up. Hansu took out all 6 of the lysate solution sources, then set up the burner and the pot and started to squeeze them above the pot. Plop 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 plop. And soon the pot was filled with a green liquid. And when the liquid started to boil, he started to break apart the scales of the barb snake and started to throw them in. The hardness of the scales on barb snake's skin was extremely powerful, but it wasn't to the point where you couldn't break it. It's not good enough for a weapon. So he had to make a new one. In the same way the barb snake made his scales. Shockingly, when the hard scales entered the boiling lysate liquid, they all melted down. And Hansu, who had seen the green liquid slowly turn silvery, plopped down the deuterium metal he made once it turned completely silver. And soon a change occurred. Korororik. The deuterium metal, which did not exceed 20 centimeters and barely entered the pot, started to absorb the liquid aggressively. The needle, which had an orange tint, started to change its color very quickly as it absorbed the liquid. And soon the size increased gradually as well. The needle, which hadn't reached 20 centimeters before, was already over 1 meter long and the width was as thick as a thumb. The end is a little blunt. He molded with all his might, but due to it being hand-molded as well as the enlarging process, the tip was a little blunt. Hansu held the needle with all his strength and started to grind it with the dull pedal. Kududuk. Kududuk. A hardness that barely peeled off when Hansu used all his strength while sweating intensely. Yeah. It should at least be that hard. Hansu made a satisfied expression as he was working very hard to grind it. As I expected, you guys are the best when I'm against strong opponents. If his attacks went into the enemy easily, then cutting parts would be good, but once you go against mobs that have decent amounts of physical resistance, cutting attacks don't work well. If one was confident in fighting up close, then rather than long swords that cut, needles and daggers that stab are much better in going through the enemy's defenses. While the area of damage is small and secondary damages such as bleeding is hard, if you know the weak points of the enemy and have the confidence to stab the weak point accurately, then the needle is the best. And if I need to go through his defenses when fighting him, it should at least be this much. Hansu thought of the opponent he needed to go against in order to obtain one of the 2 hidden pieces in the first tutorial area. Tutorial 1 to 11. Number 11 out of 134 weapons that can be created with the materials gained from the monsters in the first tutorial area. If you think about, the alchemists went through a lot of trouble for a long time in order to create the best quality weapons out of the low quality materials that you gain in the tutorial area, it should at least be this much. If a Rococo lizard or carnivorous sac came out, then he could create an even stronger 1 to 17 or 1 to 96, but barb snake wasn't bad at all. It would be rather hard obtaining a better weapon in the tutorial area than this. I should conclude now. Hansu, who had grinded the edge to a sharp point, took out the goblin leather he had saved, cut it into a long piece and then applied the poison weakly onto it. Cheek. Hansu nodded as he saw the insides of the leather melt slightly and then wrapped the leather around the handle area of the needle. As he felt the right feeling of a grip in his hands, he made a satisfactory expression as he stabbed into the air. When he uses it later, he could apply poison or paralysis poison depending on his preference then. Can't we buy that? Tai-Soon looked at Hansu's weapon with a greedy expression. If it's that much, then he was willing to buy it with runes. If Hansu struggled that hard to make it, then its hardness was incredible. As he was dissatisfied with the blades that went dull from a few strikes ever since a while ago, it could only be tempting to Tai-Soon. And then Hansu shook his head. From the start, you guys cannot use this unless you were high rankers. Since the area of damage is extremely small. And something like this would be especially hard for you guys to use. Well, to be honest, it would depend on the user, so I would sell it. Despite that, he couldn't make more. I cannot make more because I used all the lysate solution. TSK. Tai-Soon looked at the bottom of the empty bot and clicked his tongue. Hansu left them like that and moved inside the train. So if I get on this, then this should move. He just needed to get on the train and go receive the reward. The battle was over. The barb snake was already strong enough, but if an even stronger boss came out after getting on the train, how would a first-day adventurer kill it? Hidden piece just means it's a hidden mission and not an impossible mission. Hansu went inside the train leisurely and sat next to the pillar of the train. His favorite spot. And then he saw someone getting on after him. Hansu chuckled as he asked, "Why are you guys getting on?" And at those words, the 3 had a slightly befuddled expression. They were not stupid. An extremely suspicious train in the very bottom of the train station. And as if electricity was working in a devastated train station, the lights were on. A feeling of a jackpot. Even in games, when something like this exists, there will be a jackpot. No matter how one looked, it did not look ordinary, but Hansu, who had psychic powers, went in there. And even with a comfortable expression. They have never seen Hansu lose tension before a battle, so the chances of there not being any battles were high. Isn't following him on obvious? But they were surprised by Hansu, who had never said anything about following him, suddenly saying things. This is one person only. Get off. Here. Only one person can get on. Hidden piece is only permitted to one person. The train was large, but it only moved when only one person was on it. It was made so that the difficulty is at where 20 people need to come down to clear, but only one person can get on. If a god existed, then he definitely had an evil hobby. That might not be the case. Saeng mumbled with a hopeful expression. And then Tai-soon spoke after him. And is there a rule which says you have to go? We've come here with our own strengths as well. Magnetism here. As Hansu glanced at the barbed snake's corpse from those words, the faces of the three all turned red. Mihi was also making an embarrassed face but didn't really stand on Hansu's side and speak for him either. I go. You dummies. Hansu laughed inwardly. It wasn't that understanding did not exist. They've probably got the idea somewhat. Whenever a chance occurs, you need to grab it. If you miss the chance because you are embarrassed or due to pride, then you will realize that that's a very foolish act. The three who were actually talking about it had their face reddened. They knew that they were pushing it as they were speaking. But they have not realized one thing yet. Oh. Of course such a rule doesn't exist, since there isn't such a thing as an absolute law in this world. Then Hansu, who was holding onto the handle of the needle, grabbed the tip instead. And as the bulky handle spun upwards, the needle turned into a bat. Hwang. The bat in Hansu's hands cut through the air while making threatening noises. You either get out now, or you deal with me first, then talk nicely with your lawyer later and find me in court. Choose one of the two. Hansu laughed while looking at the three. Damnable bastard. Tai-soon cursed as he looked at the train that was quickly making distance while making clunking sounds. It was extremely alluring. That thing that was at the end of the train station. And because of that he pondered for a moment. Should the three of them try fighting him together? He even thought inwardly. Surely he won't be too cruel, we're friends and we've come this far together. If they fought and won, they could take his weapon, and if they lose they could beg for forgiveness. Not a bad gamble. And if I take all the runes on his wrist, and even take whatever is at the end of the station. It was basically a jackpot. The chance of success was low, but it was a low-risk, high-return case. Tai-soon, who had finished his thoughts, tried to move his hands towards the kitchen knife on his waist but gave up as soon as he saw his eyes. The only reason he was talking over it because they didn't act out. Fucker! He was laughing, and the way he was handling the situation was so, but his eyes were different. He was watching enthusiastically with eyes that could destroy someone's vitality. As if he was full of expectation to see how it was going to play out. Fuck! He felt unfairness as he got scared from just his eyes, but he had to get off because he didn't have the courage to fight. Let's go up. We should move too. Mihi opened her mouth as she looked at Tai-soon. Saeng and Mihi were making expressions as if this situation was supposed to play out like this. Tai-soon spat out curses in his mind. You retards. This is why you guys aren't capable. Why are you making such an embarrassed expression? Anybody else would have done the same thing as him. I am not sorry. I am not embarrassed. Tai-soon mumbled inwardly as he grinded his teeth, raised his body and headed upwards.